I'm Mark Holthaus, and I'm going to be talking about the safety mindset. Now, before we get started, I'll let you know that the safety mindset is actually a process of things that you go through in all the activities that deal with rockets. So it's not just one task, it's like a dozen tasks that you need to do. So, how do you get it? Oh, down there? Okay, there we go. So starting off, if you see a potential issue in safety, like something doesn't look right, you need to speak up. That's like the first rule of safety. Never let some safety situation go without having it corrected, because it ends up being a landmine that may hurt someone. Okay. Safety is the prime importance on all phases of building rockets. It's not just being out at the launch site. You need to be safe while you're doing all your testing. And you design in safety, you build it safely, you test it safely, and you are safe when you do your launching of the rocket. Rockets are very energetic devices. They're known to blow up, and they have quite a bit of potential energy that could injure people. So pay attention to safety, address all potential safety hazards. What would happen in the end is, if you followed everything, you should have a safe and accident-free endeavor. Use reasonable work schedules. That is probably one of the hardest things that you guys would have to follow, because I know a lot of students that go to the very end. It's like a day or two before the launch, and now you're pulling 24-hour days trying to get your rocket together. That is not a good idea. That makes for very unsafe operations. People can get hurt. So a tired team member is an unsafe team member. The guidelines that are for the FAA, they say a maximum of 60 hours per week and a maximum of 6 consecutive days working, and no more than 16 hours worked in a 24-hour period. Well, a lot of you guys will do like 4 consecutive days, run 24 hours a day with no sleep, and then you're out in the desert trying to launch a rocket, and you're just kind of stupid and you're making mistakes. This is supposed to help prevent that. So you guys are the safety officers, but the other people in your team have to realize that not just the safety officer is responsible for safety, everybody is. And you need to address safety issues immediately, even if they stop the team from working, because working around a safety hazard is not a good idea. And eventually what will happen is one of your team members will fall onto that safety problem and they'll get hurt. And you could probably talk to 3 or 4 people in the team, and they'll know that hazard was there and nothing was done about it. So fix it as soon as you can. And all accidents can be prevented. If you follow what we're telling you, you should be able to not have any real accidents. You design it to be safe, you operate it to be safe, and you should be in good shape. So should an incident or accident occur, we want you to go through the process of solving the incident or accident. So you analyze it to the root cause, you develop a corrective action. We have incident reports we want you to fill out. We want you to report the accident immediately. Don't wait. And then we want you to implement your corrective action. So spot a hazard and fix it. Do it immediately so no one else will get hurt. Okay, another thing that happens, I see this all the time out in the desert. You guys come out and you have 1 or 2 people that are working, and everybody else is standing around watching those 2 people work. You need need to distribute the workload. You need to assign backup, primary and backup tasks to everybody. That's another thing that's happened. We've been out in the desert, teams have showed up, and Jim is the guy who puts together the recovery system, and he didn't show. Okay, now what do we do? And so cross-train all your team members on different tasks. You're going to be away from your school, you're going to be away from your home, you're going to be away from the hardware store, and you can't have people showing up late. You can't go running off to the hardware store to pick up something. So you got to make sure that all your guys know how to do the task and a backup for each one of those tasks. Okay, use the buddy system, especially for hazardous tasks and lifting heavy objects. I believe Beth, what's the to lift requirement? Above what? Above 35 pounds, you're supposed to use two people lift stuff. Usually your ground support equipment weighs more than 35 pounds. So use two people to help lift it. But also what I've added to the buddy system is that each of you should check the other's personal protective equipment. In other words, if you need to wear a gas mask or a lab coat or cold gloves or whatever, each member should check the other member to make sure he's wearing whatever the prescribed safety equipment is. Make sure it fits properly, it functions properly, and don't do it before starting your do it before you start your task. During the task, one of the buddies should be reading the procedure. The other person should be performing the tasks. So there's nothing more maddening than having a procedure sitting there on the concrete. If you're trying to run it, the wind is blowing and the papers are blown away. If the other person is holding them and following them, he can tell you what you're supposed to do. He makes sure that you go through the proper sequence on the steps, and he makes sure that all the stuff gets done. So he's basically monitoring what you're doing to make sure whatever's supposed to be done is completed. Okay, have an escape route. A lot of times what happens is a hazard will occur and you can't get past it. So if there's a fire, you want to have some way of getting out of the room. Now you guys are going to be using chemicals and things to clean your equipment, and you could have a fire. So you need to know your escape route. So you need to have one escape route for every place that you're doing your work. Develop the exit plan, set a meeting point after you, so that when people leave the area that you can now account for each team member. At NASA, what happens is they have a doorway that you go through, and they have all the badges. So you take off your NASA badge, you stick it in the rack, and you put on a badge. So when they come out there after they've cleared it because of a problem, they can look up at the badge board and they can see who's still in there. Their face will be there. And usually those are the people that are involved in the problem that's happening. I'm not suggesting you guys do that, but it's very important that once people exit, that you account for everybody. You also need to document it, the exit routes, and then you need to communicate it to each member and let them know where the escape routes are. So in this room, the escape routes are the door in the back, the door up here in the front. If one of the students happen to explode here because they've got too much in their head, then go out those doors. We'll meet you downstairs in the parking lot. Okay, make first aid available. You should have a good first aid kit located in a common area where everybody knows it is. You should show it to them, communicate its location, and have common treatments available. So first aid, a lot of things that we deal with are heat burns, chemical burns, cuts both large and small. Also, we're dealing with a lot of chemicals, so you want to have eye wash, because if you get stuff in your face, you want to wash it off. And if you get it on your clothes, you need a shower to shower it off. Okay, use checklists. Checklists help you remember stuff. And I know that when you're in a hurry to do something, a lot of times things get left behind. And we've made many trips to the hardware store because we left something behind at home. it takes me 4 hours to drive from my house out to Friends Amateur Rocketry site. Well, if I leave a wrench at home and it's something that I can't get anywhere else, I'm kind of messed up for the rest of the day. And we have sent somebody back, and I can say Greg here was nice enough to go back and get a piece of equipment that I left at home. But checklists help you remember. You need to prepare the checklist for all phases of your operation. And there's a hazard checklist that we've provided to you guys for prep on procedures. So it lets you step through all the different hazards that you possibly have during a certain operation, and you need to document. And then also it makes sure that you remember your personal protective equipment. It's not good if you need to have a gas mask or a chemical suit while you're dealing with hydrogen peroxide and you've left your PPE at home. That's just not something. We don't condone anyone doing their procedure anyway because they don't have the personal protective equipment. Okay. Another good use for a checking list is a packing list. You should have a line item for each item that you're taking with you. This checklist can be done in any order so that as you're coming up with the things that you're going to pack, you can check them off as you go. You need a checkbox at the beginning of each line because the checks are a visual indicator that you've actually done it. Don't just have line items and then say, yeah, we did this, we did this, we did this. You need to physically check them off so that you can go back and look at your checklist and see that there's an empty slot. That means that's something you haven't packed yet. You can either check it off or you can initial each item. I recommend that you touch each item that you pack. So when you place it in there and you're checking it off, the person who's holding the checklist should have been the guy who touched the part in the box. That's to make sure that the, let's say the igniters that you need are actually in the box and not sitting at home on your bed. Use initials if you have multiple people. And why I say that is now you can look at the checklist and you can see, oh, John put this in the box. Now you can go ask John, well, where is it in the box? Because he's the one who did it. So that indicates who's the responsible person. Okay. The packing list also helps you when you're at the test site. It should include all your tools, your equipment, your spare parts, and your PPE. You should have a contents checklist with each container that you're storing. And then you should have a storage container checklist. So when you get out there, you know that you have 12 containers. Each container has a checklist of all the things that are in the checklist itself. Once packed and closed, do not remove something from the container. I've seen that happen so many times. We've got it all packed, and then somebody was working on another rocket. They come over, take a tool out, and now we're out in the desert, and there's no tool, and you need it. And then the other thing you can do is run the packing list again once you're out in the desert. I have dozens of tools that teams have left behind. And tools are expensive, and it takes time for you to go and get new ones. So I'll use these on both packing and repacking. Okay, training is another important piece of doing safety. So all members should take and pass the prescribed tests. That includes safety procedures, the incident report, which you're going to give you. You should come up with an emergency procedure. There's safety checklists, the packing list. You need to rehearse all these, both the nominal and the contingency procedures. And you also should be trained on the use and maintenance of your personal protective equipment. There's nothing worse than having a piece of personal protective equipment that's put on improperly and is not working for them. A gas mask needs to seal against your face, and you need to breathe through it, and it needs to be working. If it is not, that means that you're putting yourself in even bigger trouble because now not only are you breathing the hazardous air, but you're also restricting your breathing, which could affect you physically. And then you need to record team member training in the training record, which we're going to also give you a copy of. Now, team member task assignments. Each assignment that you get, you need to dry run to gain proficiency, and you need to dry run it before you go out to do your live test. You shouldn't have to figure it out on the spot. That is the wrong place to do it. And then again, I repeat that you should cross-train your team members. So you should have at least 2 or more people that know how to install the igniter, or 2 or more people that can fuel the rocket, 2 or more people that can run the control console. Because invariably something will happen to one of those people, and now you don't know how to do it, or you have to guess. And there's nothing worse than somebody who's trying to run a procedure that they've never run before, and there's a lot of safety issues in it. Okay, I'll try to speak louder. Okay, so I ran through that kind of quick. But what I'm trying to point out here is that everything that you do involves some sort of safety, even the design of your rocket. So I got the design of the rocket, how I'm packing, how I'm doing procedures, all my checklists, my personal protective equipment. All that plays together to make sure that you're safe. If you follow all this stuff and you get your team members to follow all this stuff, then you will be safe, and you shouldn't have any incidents out at the test site. So any questions? Sure.
So when you're saying to use the buddy system, using one person to manage someone who's actually doing the task, do you have any experience with someone managing 2 people at a time, or should you always stick to one person to one person?
Well, okay. So the question is that when you use the buddy system, is it just one guy reviewing the task and the other person doing the task, or can you have one guy reading the checklist and having multiple people do it? And usually what we do is we have a pad supervisor, and he will be doing multiple people. But the problem is that his focus should be on the safety of the guys that are doing the hazardous task and not the people around him. So I don't recommend that you do one guy supervising like 3 and 4 people, because it's too distracting.
Or going on this, when we're doing a prompt loading, we're expecting to have 2 people with their hands on things and 1 person.
That part is good. If you're performing one task and there's like 2 people involved, then you have the 3rd person supervising and making sure you go through the checklist. And also, you'll see that when we do the procedures, which is going to be tomorrow, I have a lot of stuff that you need to put in your procedures, and it will talk about how many people you need to have with the task. Anybody else have a question?
Do you have a policy on drugs and alcohol? I noticed it wasn't mentioned in the safety guidelines.
Do I have a policy on drugs and alcohol? If you are visibly drunk, that is very, very, very bad. It's like having somebody that's hadn't had enough sleep. It's like texting while you're out the wheel of the car. It's just as bad. I know that you guys like to party overnight because I've done it myself. When you're doing a rocket that's as big as the rocket that we're talking about that goes to 60 miles, I recommend that you don't do any drugs or alcohol unless if it's prescribed drugs from your doctor and you need to have them. You know, we can hear the other side. Okay, any other questions? No drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, just one over here.
Okay.
I don't know if I caught it in the docs, but is there like a first responder training that you suggest, or like an actual certification?
We haven't put that into this, but when planning the exit route would be another thing to put in there would be how would you rescue your guys if they were involved in it. But mostly if someone's trapped, then you can't rescue them either. So,
So we're talking about like first responder training for like first aid.
Certifications, there's also like, for example, when you're doing like trail work for a PCTA or something, you do like wilderness first aid training, or CPR training.
so the question is, should there be any first aid training? And I would say there should be. Now, we don't mention it in any of our training stuff, but that's a good point, and we'll add that for the future. I do talk about the first aid kit. I do talk about the escape routes, but having training would be good.